Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast. Today, I am privileged. It is an honor to introduce and to have Mr. Thomas P. Seager on the podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, actually. So we'll get into all the ice baths at Morozko and all of the things that we need to learn about cold plunges immediately after we hear your story, because I really want to know, how did this all come to be in the first place?
Thanks for having me here, Josh. It's a pleasure to connect with you because I know you've been following us, I think, probably longer than anyone else. It's probably been 5 years since I first saw your email and your Instagram, across my inbox. And I've always wondered about who you were. So probably your audience already knows. But all as I know is here's this really forward-thinking guy who's been following Morozko. He's been into ice baths forever. Long before I published a book or even an article, you somehow found us when I was at ASU every day. I thought I was going to be an engineering professor for the rest of my life. But since then, a lot has happened. I'm still teach engineering business practices. I still teach these courses in sustainability. But I'm the CEO of Morozko, and it's gotten to be a lot bigger in the last 5 or 5.5 years since you and I first sort of found one another online. And I can't say that there was a plan to any of it. I just wanted to be able to do ice baths on the weekend. I was sick of buying all this ice. I live in Phoenix. It takes like 15 minutes to melt 200 pounds of ice, and then it feels like this whole ordeal. So me and Jason Staupper, we're engineers, and we figured we ought to be able to invent something. We did. We didn't know at the time that it was like the first commercially available ice bath that makes its own ice. We thought, we were going to invent something. We had our friends over, and then somebody wanted to buy one. So this goes way back. I put it up on Etsy. I didn't know what I was doing. And then somebody else found it, and somebody else found it. It turned out that there were a lot of people who wanted an ice bath that makes ice, and they had to really work to find us. So we started a company. We didn't know anything about marketing. We didn't know anything about anything. But Ben Greenfield picked it up. He put us into his book. Then it got really big. We kept making improvements to the design. And now, Josh, I don't think you can throw a stone through Instagram. You can't scroll through Instagram without hitting 4 ads for, what they say are ice bath companies, when it's really an aquarium chiller hooked up to an inflatable pool or a tub or something like that. This whole industry has gone way out of control, and it's kind of swept my career along with it, because now, I wrote this book. There's 600 frickin' scientific citations about the health benefits and the dangers and how to do ice baths and for what condition. I'm a whole different kind of professor than I used to be, and I've had to learn a lot about business.
Well, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So in that regard, you should be absolutely flattered. There are certainly a lot of imitations out there, and lots of guys that are just trying to get into the business. You can tell they're not quite on your level. And I don't think there is anybody else on your level in the market. I haven't found anyone. And when I did find you initially, it was because I was completely tasked with finding the absolute best of the best. And there was no question that was my duty. That was my task. So, that's what led me to you. That's how I found you. But to be honest,
I think about some of your clients. Yeah. They are extremely successful. Not that it's been an easy road for them. Their success wasn't just handed to them, but now they have it, and there's no reason that they should have anything but the best. And so I'm trying to imagine you talking with your client and the client saying, don't give me any piece of crap. Find me the people who really know what they're doing. And I'm glad you found us.
Yeah, honestly, it was life changing for both me and one specific person that we're thinking of at the moment. Their whole family has reaped the benefits. Their entire social network, their circles have reaped the benefits. People have come over and got a plethora of education on the subject just from being able to maybe make their way into the ice for once. With that
It's actually
said,
very embarrassing because, we put that unit on the beach and we're like, oh, yeah, we tested it in the desert in Phoenix. It's going to be great. But we don't have a beach in Phoenix. We
right.
didn't know about salt spray and humidity and all that stuff. And so we had to send a repair tech out to your client to rewire it, to really weatherproof the whole electrical. And that was when I knew, though, that the client wasn't going to be a problem because the kids came out. I hear from the repair tech, he's like, yeah, the guy's really cool. The whole family's going in the ice plunge. He's really happy to have it back and up and running again. We learned a lot from trying to meet that standard, you know?
Well, honestly, you couldn't have done a better job. You guys impressed from the get go. The machine was absolutely everything is advertised. It delivered on every promise, and to make, I mean, I don't know if anybody really understands what it is to make ice in the desert. That in itself is mind boggling. So, congratulations on all the success. So how much about ice baths did you know, like when you were doing them for yourself, when you were putting this on Etsy? Where was your education level on the subject?
All I knew is that I hated cold showers. You know, I was separated from my wife. We were headed for divorce. Um, I hadn't been taking care of my health at all. Like I was focused on my kids' health or my career or all these other dumbass excuses for why my life really stunk. And so I started reading every self-help book that I could get a hold of. Stuff like really oriented towards men. Robert Glover. He wrote that book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And I poured through that. I started going through other books written by men about how to take charge of your life and make it better. And so one of them was like, oh, you need to take cold showers. You got to toughen yourself up there, wimp. And so it's not even that cold, Josh. In Phoenix, the tap water, even in the winter, it's like 60 degrees. But I get in there and I hate every second of it. But I need to toughen up. So I keep doing the cold showers. Then I got a call from my former student, Jason, and he's like, have you ever done ice baths? No. Have you ever heard of Wim Hof? I never heard of anything, all right? But we go to one of these Burning Man groups, and it's yoga and it's breathing, and this is all new to me because I'm a pretty straight arrow engineering guy. But what the heck? I'm in this open-minded, curious state of mind. I get in the ice bath, totally different. Then 4 years later, I find a study done in Finland at the university. It's a name I can't even pronounce, like Oulu or something like this, right? Arctic Circle. And they studied partial body cold water immersion versus whole body cold water immersion. Partial body stimulates your sympathetic nervous system. So it activates that fight or flight. It's no wonder it makes me angry, because I'm ready to fight somebody in the shower. But whole body also activates the dive reflex. So you get that fight or flight in the first 15 or 30 seconds, and then the dive reflex takes over. Your heart rate goes down, your respiratory rate goes down. Even though your metabolism is amping up, your body is slowing everything else down, relaxing your brain. You hit that sort of meditative state because your body thinks you're going to die and it doesn't know how long, are you going to go get the lobsters for dinner or are you going to spear a fish or whatever? It's the mammalian response to being immersed in cold water is to slow everything down. And I loved it. It was totally different. And I suck at meditation. So the way it snapped me back to my present moment and gave me some calm, which is a very surprising result, I know. I'm like, okay, I want to keep doing this. That was when we were like, got together every Sunday, but it kept getting hotter and hotter. And we said, all right, I want to do this every day. Sometimes people, they'll say, well, Morozko is so much money. You try going down to the Quickie Mart and getting 150 pounds of ice every day, and then Morozko is going to look like a really good investment. The difference is I can go in for 2 minutes. I can go in for 5. I can go in for 20 seconds if I want because it stays cold all the time. And that is the real life changer for me. It's not for everybody, but when you decide, yeah, I want this all the time, then you need a machine to do it.
Yeah, it's there. It's ready to go. You can fit it into any schedule there is. That was one of the absolute game changers when it landed on that property. I wake up first thing in the morning and go right before jujitsu. It was absolutely mind boggling.
You started pre-cooling before I knew anything about pre-cooling. Like, this isn't my research. This is Craig Heller out of Stanford University. And he did the work on cooling and peak muscle output. And he showed enormous gains, like 2, 3 times the number of pull-ups that his moderately trained athlete. He's grabbing graduate students, and he's like, hey, how many pull-ups can you do? And they'll go from 8 to 20. And the gain that he measures in his lab in these untrained athletes is so spectacular that you wouldn't believe it if it weren't coming from a PhD at Stanford in a controlled experiment with scientists. So we put a Morozko at ARX in Houston. And ARX has these incredibly complicated machines. They're called constant displacement machines. So they use computers to change the load, but keep the displacement, the rate, the same. And people started texting me and saying, I'm getting 25, 30% boost in my ARX measured output when I do the Morozko before I do the ARX workout. So that's when I discovered Craig Heller's work. That's when I discovered pre-cooling. Well, what Craig didn't know, and I had only discovered accidentally, is that pre-cooling also gives you a huge testosterone boost. What happened to me was I'm getting my labs done. I'm trying to take care of myself. I lost a lot of weight. I'm like, I'm going to start dating again. I got to be in good shape. But my prostate specific antigen comes back and it's elevated. And it scared the shit out of me, Josh, because, I was 52 at the time. I'm 58 now. And you go to the internet and it is a way of like playing tricks on your mind. I thought I was going to die of prostate cancer. And that's not true, right? I mean, I had an inflamed prostate, but that doesn't necessarily equal cancer. And then all the big websites, Mayo, WebMD, Cleveland Clinic, everywhere that people are getting their advice now, they're all like, you got to go have a prostate exam. They'll do a biopsy. Maybe you got to make sure this isn't cancer. So I started talking to guys, and guys were like, yeah, it's amazing, Josh, how many guys my age have been through something very similar. And they go, I had the biopsy, it led to a sepsis infection. I was in the hospital on super antibiotics for like 7 days. And that wasn't even a cancer story. Another guy younger than me, he had like 3 of the 12 samples that came out of his prostate were positive. And I'm like, but maybe those were false positives. You go, no, I wasn't taking any chances. I have my prostate out. But now he can't get an erection, like for the rest of his life. And I'm thinking, I'm not married. I don't even have a girlfriend. My choices are a lifetime of erectile dysfunction or figure this out. And I said, I'm going to figure this out. That's when I got really serious about ice baths. I got into keto. I got my prostate specific antigen. So this is the PSA from 7 down to less than 2. I'm like, I'm clear. I'm getting all my labs done. I'm congratulating myself. I go to my urologist. I want that clean bill of health. And he goes, no, I want to do one more test. But Josh, he didn't even care about my PSA anymore. He looked at the whole blood panel and there was testosterone and mine was 1180. And so you got to remember, by this time I'm like a 53-year-old fat guy and he's about my age. And here are the labs and this 1180, it says too high, out of range. He wanted one more test, not for my prostate, but for luteinizing hormone because I had to discover this. I had to Google this, right? But luteinizing hormone is what stimulates the gonads to produce the testosterone in the first place. So he knew if my luteinizing hormone was low, but my testosterone was high, it's because I'm juicing, I'm on a cream, I'm putting shots in my butt or whatever. And he couldn't let it go. So he sends me back to the lab. Luteinizing hormone comes back. It's off the charts. It's like 8.9 or something. What Heller didn't know, and I didn't know, and my urologist didn't know, is if you pre-cool your workout, and this is only true for men, and it doesn't have to be a lot of exercise, but you get a little exercise while you're still feeling cold, your testosterone gets this huge boost. So I sent my lab results to the urologist, and he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like he didn't even care, Josh. And that's kind of the way medical doctors are. Because what is he supposed to do? Change the way he treats all his other patients? Prescribe ice baths? He would lose his license if he took any of this seriously. But I wrote an article about it. I said, oh, the whole world has to know about this, right? I'm going to put an article up on Morozko. Every man everywhere with low testosterone should know this. Nobody read a damn thing because it turns out that the way the internet works is nobody cares what some idiot, professor from ASU that nobody's ever heard of happened to his testosterone. So Google didn't find it. Nobody found it until Joe Rogan, and Joe read it. And it was right when the whole Liver King thing was happening. Like, oh, what a surprise. Paul Saladino says, I didn't know he was on testosterone. Of course he was, but it was really in the news. And so Joe found this article and he read it out on his podcast to David Goggins. He says, hey, there's this guy, he started pre-cooling. I was in Iceland with my girlfriend. And, we're going to see the Northern Lights because, Josh, this has worked out well for me. I don't have a prostate problem anymore. My dick is working great. My testosterone is working great. I'm going to see the Northern Lights with my girlfriend. And my phone blows up as soon as it comes back on, And people are like, hey, you're on the Joe Rogan podcast. I'm like, what? I think I would know. And they're like, no. He's reading your article. And now men from all over the world are saying, Professor Seager, I think you found the cure, And that is not the case. What is happening is testosterone is metabolically expensive for a man to produce. Nowhere near like pregnancy, but you get my point. When the metabolism isn't right, the body starts looking for ways to cut back. One of those ways is testosterone. If you do your workout, you'd say, oh, I'm getting pumped. I'm getting my anabolic gains. This is good for my T. And then you do an ice bath, testosterone actually goes down. Luteinizing hormone goes down. But when you do it the other way, you stimulate mitobiogenesis, your body like boosts the testosterone. For some reason, this sequence turns out to be really important in men. And there's a clinical trial out of Japan that was published in 1991 that demonstrates this effect. So now guys all over the world are fixing their metabolism, fixing their testosterone, writing to me to tell me about it. And every once in a while, I'll put their text messages up on my Instagram and say, hey, here's another guy, and here's another guy. But I don't do it probably as often as I should because every time I share this, there's some medical doctor out there, on Twitter or wherever who says, there's no double-blind, randomly placebo-controlled gold standard trial that says the thing that happened to you actually happened to you. And I want to say, well, screw you. Because nothing matters more to me than my body and my results and what is working for me. So even though I'm a scientist, I'm like, don't throw your studies at the studies are a source of hypotheses. And if you see a study and it says, oh, this works pretty well, try it. And if it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, that's not the study's fault. That's not your fault. It's just you don't belong to that cohort that they study. And there's nothing wrong with that.
So have you seen anybody reversing their methodology for this and instead of taking ice baths after training, doing the pre-cooling sessions like in the NFL? I know you've actually had conversations with NFLers recently.
Turns out Nick Bosa is wicked smart. Not just because he is Morozko, so that makes him smart right away, right? But because I've talked with him, I've talked with Fred Warner, I've talked with Mitch Wisnowski. The 49ers are really into Morozko. And I know you're there in California, and I don't know, maybe you know some Niners fans. But when you talk to these guys, it's incredible how thoughtful they are about it. The football players, it's a blood sport, and they have the reputation for being strong and maybe they aren't the brightest students in college, but Nick says he's been reading about vitamin D and testosterone and the association between the two. More sunshine is more vitamin D, is more testosterone. But when's he playing the Super Bowl? Early February. It is the absolute bottom of that seasonal testosterone curve. And he's like, when I need that testosterone the most is when I'm at the lowest level. That doesn't make any sense. And so he has not pre-cooled his workout because he is dogmatic about, he goes, this is what, and I'm sticking with it. But I'm like, Nick, now training camp has started, but Nick, in the off season, maybe during the bye week or something, give it a shot. Pre-cool your workout. See how it feels. See if you can maintain your testosterone deeper into the season. So, last year it was in Vegas. Next time, I forget where it's going to be next February, but next time you're in the Super Bowl, you're going to want to go with your mitochondria in the best shape they can be, with your T levels in the best shape they can be. Because everything else, all his joints, they're all going to be so beat up by the end of the season. It's super hard for him to perform at his best. So a number of guys have come to me and said I was on low T. Not a few professional athletes, believe it or not, have low T. And it's more complicated for them because they don't want to pop any tests. They have to be really careful about what they're putting into their body. If they can do it naturally, they would much rather have a natural modality where the body is making its own supply. So a lot of guys have come to me and said, I had low T, doctor put me on TRT, got me up into the 700s. I read your article. I started doing ice baths and then working out. I'm at like 1,500 nanograms per deciliter. And then they'll say, but I don't really want to go off the TRT. And I go, but why? You're super normal now. You're like hyper testosterone levels. And they'll say, because it felt so bad to be down at 250. And now I feel fantastic. I don't want to take any chances. Like, I think, I watch the Mark Bell podcast. I see what he does. Some of these bodybuilders, they're going way higher than me. You think I'm okay, right? And that's where I got to go. I'm not a medical doctor. I just build machines. I can't give you medical advice. I feel great at 1180. So if you were to like slide back to around 1,000 or something, maybe it's worth a try. But I understand why they don't want to drop at all, because they found a taste of it. They have the competitiveness, they have the strength, they have the energy now, and they don't want to like risk. Have been there in my life. It feels terrible where you don't have the energy, you don't have the competitive drive, the depression is sinking in, the mental health issues are coming, and you start thinking, I'll do anything to avoid going back to that place in my life again.
Yeah, feeling is understanding, both in the negative and in the positive. You can't really argue with it. So I'm actually kind of interested by that. I can't believe there's not more NFL teams and their science departments or their, researchers who are going, hey, maybe we should actually give this a shot, especially in something like what they're at now, training camp. Go, you know what? We got a month. We have a few weeks. We can experiment, see how these guys perform, see what they probably run labs on them and everything. But
the NFL teams all have cold plunge.
Yeah.
So whether it's like a whirlpool tub or a hot tub that's been converted to cold, even the PGA has this. I talked to Luke Donald. You go out on the tour and it's a tournament. You got to play 8 holes. You got to 18 holes. You got to come back, play 18 holes again. And you think, well, this is golf, right? But what's the big deal? But Luke explained it to me that it's the same thing with Nick. The fatigue accumulates as the stakes go higher during a tournament. So the PGA has their own sort of mobile recovery cold thing. And there's 2 things wrong with it. One is they have to use chlorine. We use Ozone, exclusively Ozone, because I don't want chlorine anywhere near me or near any of my customers. And it's tricky to work with Ozone. Most of the Ozone generators that are for sale for hot tubs, they don't work at all. So I had to test these, like 6 months of testing, and you need the lab equipment isn't expensive, but you need to know what to test for. So I tested them all, found one that works. And the boards of health don't understand that Ozone is the opposite of chlorine. Ozone works great at cold temperatures. It's crappy in the hot tub, but it works great in the ice bath. Chlorine does not. Chlorine gets less effective as the temperature goes down. Ozone gets more effective. So these teams all have cold plunge, but they all use chlorine. Mitch Wisnowski won't even get in the old units that the 49ers had. He goes, he's so funny because he's Australian, and he's got that accent, and he was an Australian rules football player, and he's tough as nails. But he goes, I have sensitive skin.
So
So
he's worried about
doesn't give
sharing,
a that.
yeah, sharing the ice
Right.
bath, getting
He's
chlorine.
he's pretty open. The Niners got rid of all their chlorinated pools. And here's the other part. They don't go cold enough. We have a customer, Noah Syndergaard, and he was on the Mets, and then he got injured, and then he came back, and then he signed a contract with the Angels. He's with the Dodgers. He's been with a lot of different teams. And I go, okay, Noah, who's got the coldest tub? And he goes, oh, it's the Dodgers. They're maybe mid 40s, I would say. Noah's doing 33 degrees Fahrenheit, at home in his Morozko. Nobody is really cold enough to activate um, that anxiety response, like where you're looking down at the water and you're seeing the ice. And this is what Joe Rogan says. He's like, no part of me wants to do this right now. You just hate it. This is Andrew Huberman. He has David Goggins on the podcast. Everybody wants to talk to David Goggins about ice baths. David Goggins doesn't want to hear it about ice baths, but Joe Rogan's going to tell him, and Andrew Huberman's going to tell him. And Huberman is like, if you hate the ice bath and you do it anyway, it will build up the anterior mid-cingulate cortex portion of your brain. And it is that portion that scientists think is the will to live. So what does that mean? That is the will to get up off the turf and get back in the huddle and say, we're going to do, I know we're down by 42 points at half or whatever the heck it is, I'm thinking the Patriots and the Falcons and their Super Bowl, but I'm going to set that block. I'm going to I'm going to do my job again and again and again. That is the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. When it hurts and the stakes are still on the line and you do it anyway, that's what our athletes are getting out of the ice bath when you go down into those mid to low 30s. They build up that willpower. They all tell me it is about the mental benefits for them. It's not about recovery or metabolic anymore, because when you go down that cold, Goggins says, nothing will make you question everything about your life like cold water does.
That's why Wim Hof is who Wim Hof is, right? And
Yeah, I wouldn't want to meet that man in a dark alley or something.
no, he's definitely got a will to live. He's resilient, if nothing else.
That's exactly right.
So, what do you think they gain at 40s, mid 40s? It's just the inflammation, and is it really literally only dealing with minor inflammation if they're not really getting into the 30s?
No, there's a lot of benefits. When you're doing the mid 40s, you get the activation of your brown fat. You get clearing of glucose out of your bloodstream. You get the mitobiogenesis to rejuvenate your mitochondria. So I got a note from a guy. He owns two of them. This is a super successful wood products executive. He's in Tucson and then he's in Idaho. And so he's at a stage in his life where he can be kind of a snowbird. Two Morozkos both place. He was prescribed cold by his doctor because at his age, he's a little older than me. And he's been career minded, dedicated. And like me, he let his health go. So now he's working on type 2 diabetes. He's working on all the diseases of aging. He's really working on longevity. He's got the money. He's got the grandkids. He wants to be around long enough to enjoy them. So he's doing 55 and he's been doing this for a year. And he goes, that's what my doctor suggested. And I know the metabolism is working, but I feel now like I've conquered it. I've mastered it. I'm like, okay, go down a degree a day, every day for 10 days. Get to 45. You will feel a challenge, even though it's only 1 degree. You will feel a challenge as you get constantly colder. So what are the benefits? Yes, you get to pre-cool your workout. As long as you feel cold while you're doing the exercise, and it doesn't have to be a lot of exercise, yes, you will get the testosterone benefits. Yes, you will burn fat. You will remodel the body composition. You won't really lose a lot of weight, but you will reduce liver fat and visceral fat, which is not a problem for you. It is a problem for me because I don't work out with you on a regular basis. You will take that dangerous visceral fat into subcutaneous fat. So for older men, there are a lot of metabolic benefits. But eventually you're going to hit that point where you're like, okay, I'm at 48 degrees and it feels good, but I'm getting kind of bored. Because most of the high achievers who are my customers, they're always trying to push themselves. They're like, where is the edge? Isn't there something a little more for me? And the answer is, yeah, go colder, because you will never conquer 34 degrees. I think this is Joe Rogan. He had Andrew Schultz or somebody on his podcast. You know, he has all these comedians, and he invites them over, and he invites them to get into his cold plunge before they go do on the podcast. Jim Gaffigan's there. He's like, yeah, no, you know, is that really? Make my living doing jokes about junk food and being out of shape. How do they get cold plunge? You know, so every comedian has a different response. And Andrew Schultz, he says, I'll be honest, I'm never doing that. Never. I hate it, and you will never get me in there. The athletes are always like, hey, you know, Gordon Ryan, he goes, I fucking hate the cold. And I'm getting into it because I do a lot of stuff that I hate. But the comedians, they're a harder sell. I don't know if Louis C.K. has ever been in a Morozko, you know? So Schultz is kind of teasing Rogan back, and he goes, I think you only do it because you feel like you win, like you're beating the ice. And Joe goes, you never win. You cannot win against the ice. Because even Wim Hof, you're going to lose every time when it's 34 degrees and there's ice chunks floating in you. The world record, I guess, is like 90 minutes or something. And you know why that guy got out? Because he couldn't take it anymore. You will never win at that temperature. And that is exactly why you do it, to train your body to do the really freaking hard things.
With that said, we had one of the kids in the neighborhood who's used to surfing the Pacific, used to the cold water, used to doing cold plunges, but that little booger would push himself to almost 10 minutes when he would do the ice baths. And we'd sit there and go, okay. And you know what's interesting? It comes back to one of your posts, because he would push himself until he shivered. Now, I saw what you had to say on a couple different posts about it. Is this something innate that's pushing him to do that? And
if you're not a kid, if you're a grown up and you haven't been doing a lot of cold, you probably have no brown fat.
Right.
And so the only way that your body can generate its heat is by shivering. So your muscles they'll get spastic, and they're using a lot of blood glucose, they're burning up some lipids, and just converting it to heat. They're not really going anywhere. But a kid will have brown fat. So I don't know how old he is, but he sounds like an adolescent, because teenagers are the one who do crazy things.
16, yeah.
Okay, perfect age for pushing himself, like trying to find out, what is my new body capable? You know, a year ago, he was 4 inches shorter or whatever. I'm just making this up. But when I was 16, every day was like, I grew up in a new body. What can it do? So psychologically, it makes a lot of sense to me that he should push himself. And I don't want to discourage him from doing that. But he has brown fat, which means his body is capable of generating heat without shivering. No wonder it takes 10 minutes for the shiver, because he has to get his core body temperature down probably more than a degree Fahrenheit, which is not hypothermia, not at least by a medical definition, but at the point where the body's like, okay, brown fat's not cutting it, we got to kick in the shivering too. If you are an adult and you don't have brown fat and you want to start a cold practice, start at a temperature is cold enough to gasp, that might be 50. And go long enough to shiver, because that might be a minute or 2 minutes. Maybe for some people who have a lot of subcutaneous fat, a little bit more. But after you get acclimated, shivering is not really the right yardstick, because you're going to get that shock response. You're going to get to your dive reflex. You're going to extract heat from your body. You're going to activate the brown fat long before your muscles start shivering. And so, maybe he's proven his point, and we can be like, hey, a kid, 2 to 4 minutes and you're fine. I'm fond to saying anything more than 4 minutes is just showing off, but I also kind of like showing off sometimes. So I think it's okay if the kid wants to get in there and see how long he can go. I just don't want him to think that he has to medically get to the point of shivering to get the benefits. He doesn't.
I was even wondering a step further, wondering if this was some kind of trauma response that was actually maybe pushing him into that behavior, because he did it more than once and he would push himself in that way, that I started to wonder when I saw some of your posts. I was like, I wonder if he was dealing with the loss of a father when he was young or whatever.
A lot of stuff comes up in that ice bath. I've done some work with vets, with first responders. So I'm going to tell you one story. This is a friend who's a fireman, And we think of firemen as, they're going to fight structure fires, and they're trained for that. But most of the fire calls are really for car accidents because there's a crash, you need fire suppression, you need paramedics, like you got to get people into the ambulance. Most of these are car wrecks. And so he goes to one of his calls, car wreck, and there's a kid in the back seat. And the kid is about the same age as his son, right? And that's okay. He's going to confront that. He's got to extract the kid. The kid has the same toy that his son has. And the kid is conscious. So he's already like relating to this kid. And the kid says, "Is my mom okay?" The fucking guy lost it. Like, because how do you tell a kid, mom is not okay? That is not his job. It's not what he's trained for. And he's told me he knew he was no longer qualified in that moment to lead that team because his brain has gone in a different way. He had to like metaphorically tap out. He had to relieve himself of command of that incident until he could recover. He said, firefighters on a call like that don't sleep. So it's the same thing with police officers. It's also the same thing with Navy SEALs, with stuntmen sometimes, because they're always getting knocked in the head, and so they get traumatic brain injury. But firefighters don't sleep. He said he got into his ice bath, and that whole incident, it comes up. Now, some people, when that stuff comes up, they will start trembling. It's not thermogenic shivering. It's not for the warmth. It is release of that unprocessed trauma. Because when you have a job to do and your crew and whomever it is you're trying to rescue depends upon you having that job, you must suppress all of the trauma. Whatever you see, you got to put it out of your mind, and then it comes back later. The trembling that some people do in the ice bath is release of all of that unprocessed trauma. And if you're a hunter, you might have seen this because other animals do this too. I'm not a hunter. Yeah, I'm a fisherman. And of course the fish flops around when you got it, in the boat. That's what fish do. But the deer or the boar or the whatever it is you're hunting, it's going through its own traumatic experience because it is being hunted. And after it's injured, maybe you hit it with a car or something, you can see this. It will tremble to release that trauma. Sometimes the trembling happens and it expires right there. Sometimes the trembling happens, you're like, what the hell happened? The deer jumps up and it'll like frickin' fly away because of all the adrenaline and everything that is happening inside it. This is a mammalian central nervous system response that processes the trauma through the trembling. Peter Levine is probably most famous for his somatic approach to mental health. He's written about some of his own experiences. And when that stuff comes up in the ice bath, let it come. Yeah. Let the shiver come. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. It doesn't matter what thoughts are associated with it. This happens to me. And I'm just like, okay, today I'm here to shiver. And maybe it's 15 seconds, Josh. And I'm like, mind is cleared. Trauma is processed. I'm ready for whatever crap is going to hit me that day.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-boggling how therapeutic it can be, and what does come up in the ice is very similar in that regard to deep breathwork sessions that I've had. And when you said somatic, I worked with a somatic practitioner in California who really got into my spine on something, and the neurology and everything at that time didn't even make sense, but it did kind of correlate to what I would go through in ice baths when I first started them. And before I found you guys, I actually plugged in a freezer and did the old Wim Hof hack, and I made a freezer. And that was the way that I got introduced to it. And I was by myself most of the time. And some of the things that I went through in that way, it really made me sleep well at night. And it was life-changing.
Part of the reason that it makes you sleep well is metabolic. So there's the psychological, which is terrific. But when you burn all that fat and that glucose in the ice bath, because it will rev up your metabolism, you can get a continuous glucose monitor. You can get a continuous ketone monitor, and you can measure these for yourself. So in a way, Gary Brecka is right when he says, there is nothing that will burn fat faster than a cold plunge. But he's also wrong. It's like 60% of what Gary Brecka says is true. And you got to figure out what the other 40% is, because it will not promote weight loss. your body knows that you burnt all that fat. And then when you go to sleep, it will drop your metabolism. There are core body temperature measurements that will show this. So your metabolism slows down, your core body temperature comes down a little bit at night, so your body can rebuild the subcutaneous fat that it burnt up. And all that's okay. This is homeostasis. But you sleep great because your body has reduced your temperature to a level that is more conducive to that deep sleep.
What is the mechanism that goes into effect with somebody who has diabetes and has sleep apnea and is walking around in fight or flight all the time? Then they get into the ice bath, or I've seen it firsthand with cryo as well. If they're in an extreme condition and they're never exposed to something like that, that affects their sleep dramatically as well. My dad, for one, when I got back here to Florida, I took him in for cryo, and he handled it in the machine a lot better than I thought he would. And he was extremely relaxed after, and he said he hadn't slept like that in years. So what is the
That's
mechanism?
fantastic.
Yeah.
Sleep is so important. People don't understand that sleep apnea is associated with metabolic dysregulation, for example. And I would love to be able to explain the relationship. I don't know. I read the Breathe book. I think that was James Nestor. I felt like I learned a lot, but I'm not a sleep scientist like some guys are. I know from talking with Dr. Kirk Parsley how important sleep is. And I know that the remedies that are sort of over the counter that you can take, oh, this will knock you out. But that's not sleep.
Yeah.
That's just that maybe it numbs you, you close your eyes, you don't experience the world for a little while, but you're not getting that deep sleep. And so whether it's breath work, whether it's cold exposure, whether it's getting good light hygiene, sun during the day, darkness at night, taking care of your mitochondria so that they can rebuild the melatonin because they make their own melatonin. It's essential to protecting them from damage when you're exercising or you're in the cold. Getting that cycle fixed, this is the way that Doc Parsley is treating his patients, not by putting them on, I don't know what it is. They say give your kid Benadryl so they'll sleep in the car, I guess. But that's not the sleep that we're talking about.
Yeah, they're just being quiet. They're not actually recovering and getting good sound sleep. I guess that's what.
Oh, that's not a recommendation. I got that off of James McMurphy's song. Like, I've never done that.
Our grandparents all went the Southern Comfort or whiskey route at some point in time, and they tried to do the same thing that way. They're all forgiven. We learn as we go.
Right.
So you posted something that registered with me very deeply, and it was that one of those moments where I was like, all right, I have to have a conversation with you, because I wanted to even let you know how much our lives paralleled in this way. You said that your father was sick, and you had a conversation with him, and in that conversation he made it clear that he outsourced his health to his doctors, or that it was his doctor's responsibility. And your reaction to that was absolutely parallel to mine and my own relationship with my father and watching him go through his health issues when I was younger. So please share that, if you don't mind, share that story, share that epiphany, and how much did that play a role in what you're doing right now?
When my dad said that his health was his doctor's problem, I was really angry at him. And I was probably 48. I was a grown man. I had kids. I should be over this, right? But I don't know if you ever stop being a son when you're sitting there talking next to your dad. So, yeah, was angry. But let's put it in perspective because I've thought about it since. The man was born in 1930. His father was a stockbroker, and his mom became pregnant. He was the second child. She became pregnant with him when the stock market was doing great. Family's fortunes looked wonderful. Stock market crashes in October. He's born in February. And then he goes through the Depression. He's a kid. And then he goes through a World War II, but he's still really too young to serve. He's just, he's affected by the war, but he can't do anything about it. And then he enlists in the Air Force. And then they send him to Japan, and he's a meteorologist and stuff. At some point, I had to understand that my dad's concept of voluntarily seeking discomfort just seemed like total bullshit because the Air Force made him do push-ups, you know? He doesn't want to do them anymore. He's earned that right. He's got a doctorate and now he's a university professor. That's I kind of followed in my father's footsteps because he faced hardship when he was a kid, whether it was in the Depression or during the war. And his psychology is, why should I make my life any more difficult? You know, you should be dang glad I was able to afford a color TV when you were 7 years old, you know, because we're talking the 70s, right? And I remember the day he brought it back. And I thought, I didn't know what the lottery was, but, you know, I thought this was like the most amazing thing. We got color now. So there's the psychology that my father had because of the way he grew up that says you do not voluntarily do the uncomfortable things. Inevitably, that stuff is going to be forced upon you. So that's one. Then I had another realization, and this came out of a conversation I had recently with Brian Bradley, who does the Egoscue method. And Brian says he doesn't take insurance. And it hit me. When you go to your general practitioner, because you're like, oh, you know, my stomach has been, or whatever, oh, I got this thing in my back, or whatever. The general practitioner needs to make a diagnosis to get you a referral, to get you cleared for a specialist, to send you to a lab so that the HMO will determine whether they're going to cover it. And then this is your copay. And there's this whole like freaking labyrinth. You have to go through the jigsaw puzzle of HMO care. And at every stage, it's someone else's decision. Do you get this scan? They said, okay. Do you get this treatment? They said, no. Do you get this, whatever the heck, this follow-up? They said, well, but you have to pay this much, and these are the limits. It is no wonder my dad thought somebody else was in charge of his health care because he was unwilling to crack open his wallet and spend my inheritance on his own tests and on his own doctors, at his own, you know, write his own checks. And I kind of get it because at his stage in life, he didn't know how much nursing he was going to need. He didn't know, you know, what he was going to need this money for. And so he thought, well, you know, I'm just going to do this. I'll get this. Well, it's so that I can get the Medicaid for the whatever. And it had a way of disempowering him, of disconnecting him from his own health. He's only going to do what the other people tell him to do. And that is a dang shame. It is a way that all of these institutions, which if you give them credit, are well-meaning. Nobody really thinks that their doctor is out to hurt them. You know, they might hate the CDC or the FDA, but most people like their doctors on a personal level. And so we're going to say, for the sake of argument, that these are well-meaning institutions, but they've created this environment that separates you from responsibility for your own health. And it is hurting people like you wouldn't believe. So Brian Bradley's saying, step out of that. You're in charge. You write the checks. You are in touch with your own body. You know what experiments you need to run and whether those are working for you. Your doctor is just a source of advice. The lab, that's just a tool that you use to make your own better informed decisions. So I'm kind of letting my dad a little bit more off the hook. And I don't know, it still comes up every once in a while. Well, I'm like, damn it, why didn't you take better care of yourself?
You know,
It's
that's
not my
really,
decision. It's his
yeah,
body, but those feelings come up.
that's really important for me to hear. You know, it's one of those things where he's in the exact same boat. And he was obviously, I was 13, 14 years old. He has 20, 30 years of poor health history or poor health outcomes. And it was one prescription for another prescription for another prescription. And it was specialist to specialist to specialist. And all throughout that ordeal, sleep apnea came up 20 years post all the first prescriptions. So I've gone through the same emotional responses I think you have. And I have come to some of the same conclusions as well that, you know, I can't put it all on him. And it's actually wrong of me to put it all on him, but we find ourselves in the same boat now. And I do think we are both like-minded in the way that we take control of our health. What is the way forward for more people? And I know Morozko is one of those for sure. But what is the way forward for this to hit the masses, for more people to understand that we are in charge of our outcomes?
I've got to wait for people to come to me. So, you know, I'm imagining your dad, and if he said, son, what should I do next? Maybe he doesn't say that because he's afraid you're going to say, okay, Dad, you got to deadlift the medicine ball hanging off the monkey bar. In his mind, he doesn't know what any of this means. And maybe he thinks that he has to do all this incredibly complicated stuff. And I know that's not what you're going to tell him, but it maybe in his mind, he thinks he's of it as this sort of all or nothing approach. And the truth is, it doesn't take a lot. 2 to 3 minutes, just do that. And then go on a walk, do the stairs, get some sun. The addition by subtraction will get most of America going in the right direction. So let me tell you what I mean. 90% of America has some degree of metabolic dysregulation. So what are they going to do about it? Get the seed oils out of your diet. The seed oils are incorporated in your body as membranes, not so much as calories. I mean, you can metabolize seed oils. So if you're burning them up, I suppose that's a good thing. But your body uses fat as a building block. Every cell membrane, including the membranes around the mitochondria, which exist inside the cell, they're made of fats. And if you give them the right proportion of fats, so these are more omega-3 fatty acids, right? They will build the right membranes. If you give them too many of the seed oils, this is omega-6, there are other fats, but I'm kind of oversimplifying. You give them too many of the wrong building blocks, they build the wrong membranes. This messes up your metabolism. You got to get the seed oils out. And it can take 2 years of zero seed oil before the material turnover in your body has fixed all of your cell membranes. So there's no better time to start than now. That's one. Get your sunlight. I know you're in Florida, and I know some dermatologist has told your dad to put on the sunscreen and get a big hat, and he's going to die of skin cancer and it's not, I want to say it's not true. And I know that is also an oversimplification, but he's got to get the sun that is going to make the vitamin D, and he's got to get rid of the sunglasses for 10 or 15 minutes a day because the eyes are so sensitive. They are the most sensitive photoreceptors. Let that infrared come in through the eyes. Let the UV come in. I'm not saying stare at the sun. I'm saying just be outdoors without the sunglasses. Give yourself 10 or 15 minutes a day. It's going to correct the circadian rhythm. It's going to signal the production of melatonin in your body that is along your correct sort of sleep cycle. And for God's sakes, get some sleep. Turn off the screens, turn off the artificial lights, sleep in the dark if you can, without the cell phone right next to you, without the Wi-Fi signals and the EMFs. And you might say I'm like an aluminum foil, wearing conspiracy theorist, but I'm kind of with Joe on this one. He goes, in his comedy special, he says, before COVID, I would have told you the vaccines were like the biggest medical miracle everywhere. He goes, now, I don't think we even went to the moon. And it's a good joke, but he's saying we have to be open-minded to what we thought was preposterous, but contains truth, because there have been too many lies when it comes to public health. So you're gonna get the sunscreen out of there. You're gonna get the sunlight through your eyes. You're gonna get the dark nights. You're gonna get the seed oils out and get a little bit of cold exposure, because brown fat is not a nice to have. Brown fat is an essential secretory organ. It does more than just make heat. It will produce FGF21. It will increase levels of brain-derived neuroprotective factors. So both the FGF21 and the BDNF, if I'm remembering the acronym correct, they help protect the brain against the kind of damage that is associated with Alzheimer's and dementia. So this is wicked important for older people. It will boost your metabolism, boost your mitochondria, which is associated with longevity, and it will convert T3, which is an inactive form or a less active form of thyroid hormone, into T4, which is the more active thyroid. The brown fat and the thyroid are in constant communication to regulate your metabolism. So brown fat isn't one of those things that you're like, oh, look at me, I got some on my scan, aren't I special? Brown fat is an essential organ that if you don't constantly stimulate it with a little bit of cold, it goes away and your metabolism becomes dysregulated. So we haven't even lifted a dumbbell yet, Josh. We haven't done a single squat. And there's these things that are within our reach at any age that will make an immediate improvement, will increase our energy levels and better prepare us mentally and physiologically for whatever the exercise is. And for some people, I don't know what shape your dad is in, but for my dad, just getting out of the chair is exercise. It's like, okay, Dad, let's do that. Let's get in this chair. Now let's get out.
I think that we're talking to the vast majority of the entire country that's in that age range. I mean, it's shamefully to admit or to say, but I think everybody is kind of in that same bed, so to speak. Get up and walk, and yes,
it makes so much sense. I wish I looked like Ben Greenfield, I wish I had 8% body fat and I could go on Instagram and I could say, you should buy at least, right? But I'm a fat guy in my late 50s. And so maybe people are like, well, what does he know? It turns out that a lot of my customers relate to me more than they relate. I mean, no offense, Josh, but to you or to Ben Greenfield or to Chris Gethin or to some other people who are really into the ice baths and they get a lot out of them. But I'm never going to look like Chris Gethin. And it's not even, I wouldn't organize my life around that. I'm still, I lead this monastic existence of the mind with my books and stuff. I'm just trying to take care of myself. I'm not trying to sell jeans or anything. And a lot of guys, I think, can relate to how do I make an incremental improvement that keeps me sharp at work, that extends my health span, that gives me a longer career, that helps me achieve a little bit more. There's that great commercial of the older guy, the gentleman, I don't know if you've seen it, but he's practicing with his kettlebell and he's doing this motion and he does it all year. And then he picks up his granddaughter at the end of the commercial and he holds her up because that's what he's been training for. So she can put the star on the Christmas tree. And I'm like, oh, they got me. I don't even know what they're selling, but I want to buy that.
Yeah, I think it was a European commercial for something, but it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
So what else are you prioritizing for yourself? I know, obviously, you're going to have a cold plunge regimen, but what else are you building into your day to get that sunlight, to engage some of these practices?
I'm a big fan of keto. Now, I get up, I get sort of my Huberman dawn, right? Because you can't follow Huberman without hearing him say, get up, get the sunlight, get that infrared. And so I do that. 5 o'clock this morning, I jump out of bed most days like I'm a kid waiting for Santa Claus to stuff my stocking or something because I have so much that I want to do when I wake up. And the first thing is get the dawn, get in the Morozko. So I'll usually, my Morozko's on my balcony, it faces east. I'll usually get a little sun in my eyes as the sun is coming up, and I'll get a little cold to start the day. But as far as what else am I doing, I'm a big fan of keto. I'm also a big fan of like homemade, delicious desserts. And you can say, well, how can this be compatible? I will splurge, on the high carbohydrate meal. If I'm in a great restaurant and I'm in the mood for something sweet and chocolatey, I will do that. I don't stay in keto all the time. And I'm not Sean Baker, where I'm not going to be, carnivore. Maybe that's why I can't lift like Sean Baker can lift. But I like my treats every once in a while. I will cycle in and out of keto. I will occasionally eat something with a seed oil in it because I'm just not so dogmatic about it, but I won't have salad dressing. I don't need potato chips that are fried in canola or something. I'm just not going to screen every single ingredient list to get every single drop of peanut oil or soybean oil out of my diet. The other thing that I've been thinking about is eating more seasonal. Sean Baker hasn't had a blueberry, in 8 years or something like this. But I happen to like blueberries, and especially during the summer. Would my ancestors have been like, no, we won't eat the blueberries. We're going to go kill this bear over here. My ancestors would have been like, blueberries, we're going to, right? And so if it's in season, I'll eat that too. So I've got some of those healthy fruits that are going in my diet. And fish. I really underestimated and I live in Phoenix, there's no ocean anywhere, but I really underestimated the importance of fish, wild fish, not farm-raised salmon or something, but wild fish for the brain. So whether that's oysters, I don't know, oysters are making the round on Instagram. And people are saying, oh, this is a superfood. And I get it. There are minerals in there. There are the right fatty acids in there. And frankly, they taste like the snot of the ocean, you know? But if you prepared them well, I mean, I enjoy them. I can't get Amanda to eat them, but I have way underestimated the importance of fish, finfish and shellfish that should be in my diet. So I'm working more of that in now too.
Awesome. I know Sean Baker is going ribeye crazy right now and has been for quite a while, which I don't mind either. But we watched
I
other.
hope he does one of those posts where he's got me on some rant about blueberries, sounding like I'm an idiot, and he's just carving up a tomahawk, because I'm not worth making fun of. But I do enjoy his posts where he's like, this person sounds ridiculous, and I'm going to have a steak.
Well, we did watch Paul Saladino come around and start incorporating those other things into his diet because he needed to and because he was having issues. So, to each their own in that regard. I'm not going to tell anybody what to eat from now on. I will point them in the direction of Sean Baker and of yourself and people that have had outstanding results from keto. But telling people what to eat, my days of that are done. And, just live my own life and let them ask me what works for me if that comes up, so to be.
It
So,
sounds like the right way to do it. I'm sick of the calorie debates. Because look, I did my dissertation on thermodynamics. Like, I get thermodynamics, and the calorie fallacy has gone way too far. I'm happy that the calories are on the nutrition label, and people should have sort of a general idea of calories. But the devotion to the calorie in, calorie out hypothesis was just an excuse to try and sell kids marshmallows for breakfast. So don't take that stuff too freaking far. The quality of the calorie is way more important than the quantity of it. I just don't want to argue with people about what they're eating anymore.
yeah, people are too willing to eat things that are not food. And I think if we could just eliminate that from the mindset, like, look, if you just know you're not supposed to eat these things that you can't pronounce, we'd all be far better off. So, this other project of yours, your other business, the Green Light, please enlighten me. I know it's a headache remedy, but there's other reasons that people would engage this practice, right?
Turns out green light has an analgesic effect. It's more than just headaches. University of Arizona did a study with people who suffer from fibromyalgia. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some evidence that fibromyalgia is an autoimmune disorder. There's some evidence that there's a relationship between the psychology and the physiology of it, where the two interact in this positive feedback loop that create this chronic pain. I don't really understand the origins of fibromyalgia. I understand the paper that University of Arizona put out there that says when we treated fibromyalgia patients with green light through their eyes, their self-reported pain scores dropped. That's no drugs. That's no Botox injection. That's nothing. It's just green light. And they did it for an hour a day in a dark room. So there's no side effects, except you could read if you want, but you got to give up the time to do the green light therapy. And then people feel better. So I think that's pretty powerful. Why would that be? I don't really know, Josh, because the best brain and headache scientists don't understand it. There's something about being in the forest, and all the shady forests in the world, they're green. So our ancestors, some aspect of them must have sought shelter in the trees. That's where you get relief from your anxiety or your fears. It calms you down. I don't know exactly what it is, but I don't have an hour and to sit in the frickin' dark and use this University of Arizona protocol. So I asked a friend of mine who makes red lights, could you make a red light but put green in it instead? And these are the wavelengths that I want. So he did that. And it came in and he's like, oh, Tom, I'm so disappointed. This thing is garbage. It's way too bright. But my girlfriend, she gets headaches. And so I happen to be with her and I'm like, oh, come on, we're going to drive over. I have to see this for myself. It can't be that bad. And we get over to his office. He's got these crappy fluorescent lights. She's getting up to like a 6 or a 7 headache in the afternoon. And I turn on this prototype and I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. He's right. It's garbage. It's way too bright. It's going to give you a headache if you didn't have one. And she says, let me see that thing. She closes her eyes and she puts it right up against her face. And she says, this feels really good. What she invented was the world's most powerful green phototherapy lamp. Instead of sitting in a dark room, you just close your eyes. This
Right.
blocks out almost all the other wavelengths of light. And then this green light, we call it my green lamp now. It's so powerful that enough green will penetrate your eyelids and still give you that analgesic effect. So she went from like a 6 down to a 2 almost instantly. We're talking, she knew it felt good right away. A couple minutes later, she's like, my headache is almost gone. I mass produced these. And by mass produced, it means like I ordered 200 of them, I had a more sophisticated version made in the United States, medical device company up in Utah. And these are for sale now at mygreenlamp.com. And some of these stories are incredible, like migraine headaches, traumatic brain injury headaches, post-concussion style headaches, even in children, stress headaches, cluster headaches, sinus headaches. And they're all getting, if not entirely, like 80% squashed. Just the pain. Other symptoms might persist, brain fog, for example, but the pain goes away. There's only one headache that we haven't been able to treat, and it's a high estrogen headache that happens to some women who they're not perimenopausal yet, but they're maybe in their mid 30s or they're getting up to 40. And for whatever reason, they're getting high estrogen at a certain time in their cycle that gives them a headache. And I don't know why, but green light won't touch it. So again, maybe 4 out of 5 people who have written to me and tried the lamp had said, this is a miracle. High altitude headache, you go snowboarding or skiing and you're up at altitude now and you're like, oh, I don't feel quite right. Get your green light out, pain gone.
Really?
But some women who've tried it are like, I'm sorry, it didn't really work for me. And that's okay, because no Botox injections, no ibuprofen, no, prescription migraine medicines. And now you can manage the pain of your headache and still take care of your kids or still go to work or still whatever it is in your life. And we're talking 10 minutes max. The relief sensation begins right away. And you do a 10-minute session, you see how you are. If you want to do another one, then that's fine too.
Have you tried
The
this
green
for?
light feels like a miracle.
Yeah. Have you tried this for other issues, other pain management?
No, like the fibromyalgia study, I haven't replicated it. Got a contract with ASU and the Barrow Neurological Institute here in Phoenix to see if we can use this more powerful version with migraine patients who are under treatment at the Barrow Neurological Institute, see if it works with them, which would be great. But if you are under pain treatment by a chiropractor for, some kind of maladjustment in your spine, a lot of people can get relief from the chiropractic release and they say they feel great. Maybe they feel a little sore later on. And then the next day, they're like, sometimes the pain begins to come back. Well, there's a chiropractor in Utah, and he says, before, his name is Dr. Jacob Perkins, before we do this, hey, maybe we'll just loosen you up a little green light, just sit here, close your eyes, let that come through. Tell me how you feel, and then we're going to get you on the table. And they're like, this is amazing, doc. Like I've gone down to maybe like a pain level where I wouldn't even come in today. I've just been like, I can suffer through it. And he goes, oh, that's great. You still ready for your adjustment? And they're like, of course, I'm here. Let's see what we can do. He started sort of taking some of the fear and anxiety of the adjustment down by pre-treating them with the green light so they go into the adjustment with more confidence. And he thinks, maybe that makes things a little easier and gives them longer lasting effects. That's as close as I've got to any kind of pain study.
Is there any way to combine this red and green?
Yes. There's a guy at Jeremy Mudick. He was the first guy ever to buy a Morozko. And then he started one of these spas where you can do, the compression sleeves and the red light, and he's got the ice bath. He's got these sauna booths. He's got red light booths. And he goes, I saw your green light post. I want to try it. I want to install it in my red light booth. And I go, well, really, it's supposed to go in through the eyes. He goes, yeah, but I got an idea. He put that on like a reticulated arm. So I have this, light and, it's adjustable. And so he's got a migraine lamp instead of like a regular light bulb in there. And so there's a wall of red light, and the red light is hitting your whole body. And then you take the green and you position it right in front of your eyes, and you close the eyes, and you get the green in through the eyes while the red is going everywhere else. And it's sold like 5 more green light lanterns because the people have an incredible experience in this booth that he invented. And they're like, are you kidding me? For $250, I want this every day at home. So I don't sell the combo, although I think it's a really cool idea that he came up with. And I wouldn't be surprised if more people start trying to do it.
Maybe you should approach one of the big companies and partner.
I'm supposed to be the big company, Josh. If I weren't so busy with ice baths, I would make this thing myself. Yeah.
Well, Morozko's got room for a red light, no?
We do. We just got a Mito Red bed. So Mito Red, instead of the coffin style, Mito Red makes these 2 panels kind of sandwich style. We just installed it in our spa so that we can go ice bath, red light. But everybody's telling me that they're going red light, ice bath. I thought it was going to be the other way around. But people figure out what works for them.
Right. So I wondered if you've got clients that are kind of up north or putting these things inside where they're not really getting the sunlight they want, if they're doing some combination therapies, they're working it out on their own.
Mike Mutzel has this great approach. People have studied ice bath and then exercise, and it's great. People have studied exercise and then sauna for recovery, and it's great. Sauna is a really good way to get your recovery from your workout without losing your anabolic gains, because we know that ice bath too soon after a workout will cut into your T levels and cut into your muscle growth. And so Mike is like, why don't we study ice bath, exercise, sauna? It's like this triple stack, and there's room for a red light in there somewhere. I don't know exactly where it should be, but my sense is like either with the sauna or right before the sauna, and I could be wrong. But Mike is like, let's stack up the thermal contrast with the exercise in the middle. And I think this is brilliant. And there's no single paper that has done any kind of preliminary study on what the hormone levels are in the bloodstream, or whether this is improving performance over time. I think it would be a fascinating study. I want to try and get the Lithuanian Sports University. I have a friend there. He's done the best work on blood levels or blood markers in ice bath. I'm sending him Morozko because I want him to go colder, and I want him to do this study on our triple stack. And then I'll write the results up to Mike, and I'll say, what do you think?
Well, I can give you absolutely no science at all, but I will tell you anecdotally, when I was jumping in the ice bath first thing, going right after into a workout, and then going home in sauna, I never felt better. I never performed better. And I had the sunlight there almost all the time to kind of be my cofactor.
Josh, that makes so much sense to me. But I can tell you another story. We have a customer. He's huge in the music world, super successful. But he also was suffering from chronic illness. And he got COVID and he never really got better. He never got his energy back. He tried everything. And so one of our other customers said, hey, have you tried Cold Forge? Boom. It's like a miracle. Boosts his immune system. He's back online. He's got the energy he needs. And so I went out to visit him, and we get to talking, and I'm like, well, have you ever pre-cooled? And he goes, no, do you think I should try that? And I go, oh, yes, totally. He got straight into the Morozko. He did not do the sauna first. He did not warm up for it. He got straight in because I told him he should do it. And he hated me. He's like, I'm never doing this again. Get out of my house. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, Josh, but he didn't want to talk to me. We have not communicated since. He had such a terrible emotional experience because I did not prepare him psychologically. I should have said, no, it's probably not for you. It's really going to suck. You're going to get in there and you're just going to hate me. I should have sold it better. But instead, I'm like, oh, yeah, you should totally do that. You got your trainer coming over. You should work out. Me and Josh, we do this all the time. No, I don't think he ever did it again, because it takes a special mentality to go into you're bone dry, right? And you're like, I'm getting into that 34-degree water. And if you're not prepared for how crappy that's going to feel in the first 15 seconds, you're just going to curse me out. You'll be on Instagram saying, Seager doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm never doing this again. I'm listening to Carnivore Aurelius, or whatever.
Another one. So Gordon Ryan and Joe Rogan and a couple other people on that podcast have had an influence in the jiu-jitsu community, and there are a lot more jiu-jiteros who are starting their day first thing in the morning with that 3 to 4 minutes, and are, not everybody's going to have a Morozko. We could, hope for that in the future, but they're coming up with different ways and they're getting it done. So it's definitely having an impact, and maybe it's community by community we see this thing grow and the momentum go.
I know a guy who's really into jiu-jitsu, and he will not go to jiu-jitsu without pre-cooling anymore, because he's also into his wearables, and I forget what he has, Aura or Whoop or BioStrap or something like this, but he's measuring his sleep, he's measuring his recovery, he's measuring his stress level, he's measuring his heart rate variability, and everything since he started pre-cooling his jiu-jitsu has improved, and not by a little, by like a lot. So he sends me these screenshots off of his wearable, and he goes, why would I do anything else now? And it kind of makes sense.
The psychological effect of seeing those numbers plummet when you don't do it is absolutely, it's a force to be reckoned with, no doubt. I was actually competing with that family I was working with. We all had our whoops, and I would put my numbers out there, and I got so comfortable and confident with my numbers. Eventually I took the whoop off because it was doing something to my wrist, and I was like, I don't need it anymore. I don't want to know the numbers anymore. Now I'm all about the process, and I'll just stick with it.
I had an Aura ring for about 2 weeks, because I got to figure out what this is all about. And it said, hey, congratulations, Professor Seager, you're sleeping great. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good. Every day, you're sleeping great. Hey, you slept great again. I gave the freaking thing away. I'm like, what is the point of this? So I don't need the numbers. I don't have a timer. I don't measure a lot of stuff. I still get my blood work done like once a year. Just where are my vitamin D levels? Where my testosterone? Is that still all working? But I'm not as into the wearables as a lot of guys are.
I cannot thank you enough. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you in this format or any format, and you've been such a factor of positive information, and you've really spread this message way further than I could have imagined 5 years ago when we met with Morozko going. But
Gosh, it's not me. It's Ben Greenfield. It's Joe Rogan. It's Mike Mutzel. It's Luke Story. It's all these guys who were early adopters, and they have this big audience because nobody listens to me, but they trust these other guys who've spent years building up an audience. So if they take something and they're like, well, I heard this guy, or they're the ones who are really popularizing it. And I think a guy like Rogan, he's done more for the health of America than all of the freaking government institutions that are supposed to be taking care of the health of America. Just by stepping out of the mainstream, getting away from like the media channels that are sponsored by the cereal companies, and then having people on his podcast and asking them questions. Say, hey, Huberman, what do you think of this? And if Huberman's like, well, that's kind of a thing. I think about it like this. Then you can write that down if you want. And then he'll have Peter Hotez, or that idiot, but or Elon Musk. They don't really talk a lot about health. Or he'll have Robert Malone or Peter McCullough or other people on. And Joe's just great about asking questions, and then people can sort through the answers for themselves by trying it. So anybody who's saying, I'm sick of like Joe Rogan talking about ice baths, I say, shut up. Listen to the rest of it then, because there are hundreds of millions of Americans out there who still haven't got the message that they need. They don't need to buy a Morozko. They need to get a little bit of cold in their life, because that heated leather seat that feels so good inside their SUV is slowly killing them.
Comfort is a drug. Comfort is a drug. I am back here in Florida. The showers are pretty warm. They're not what I like really crave. So I'll be back in a freezer here real soon.
I had something happen to me this morning that reminded me. Hot water is a fairly recent invention, but think about this: indoor plumbing, hot water heater. How long is the hot water? my father, he didn't have a hot water heater,
Yeah.
when he was born. And he just said, we're just going back 100 years. This whole idea of hot and cold running water is a very modern invention. It's no wonder we love our showers. It's like our grandparents didn't enjoy that. They had to, like, I don't know, Grizzly Adams it or something, make a fire and stuff like this. Well, the hot water that feels great is another one of those comfort drugs that's slowly killing us.
I remember my mom boiling water for warm baths when I was really little. If it
Are
got
you
cold,
serious?
if it got cold enough, we were in a house
Where
that,
did you, what were
yeah,
you in
it
Wyoming or
was,
something, Josh?
no, of all places, it was Central Florida, and we lived in a like a craftsman old house that didn't really have much of anything, and definitely didn't have heat. So when we did finally get cold fronts, didn't have hot water, she was boiling water and pouring it into the tub so we can get in there.
I don't know
Anyways,
why I picked on Wyoming. I got a couple of customers there, and I really shouldn't offend anybody in any state, right? But that's an unusual upbringing that you're describing.
yep, and not too long ago, I mean, I guess infrastructure it wasn't what it is now. So, anyways,
Correct.
please tell my audience and everybody that's had the pleasure of listening to you today where they can find you, where they can learn more. But look, your feed, you were playing a very modest response there. You are an educator to these educators, and your feed is absolutely brilliant. You've got a ton of information on there that you cannot absorb in one day, and I'm sure you're going to add to it, and people need to have this information. Where can they
Thank
find
you,
it?
Josh. For those few of you that are still listening, you can find me on Instagram, SEAGERTP. So I'll put short lectures on there. Of course, you can find Morozko Forge on Instagram, at Morozko Forge. But everything that I write is available on our website. So morozkoforge.com. You go to the science tab, and we have our blog page or whatever. You might have to search around a little bit. If you need it in the print form, you can buy a book. The knowledge, I'm a professor. I want to give it away for free as much as I can. But the book costs money to print. It's a lot easier to read than sifting through the blog. You can't find the book on Amazon, though, because I haven't figured out that part of it all out. You can just buy it on the morozkoforge.com website, and you can sign up for our articles. We call it our journal. Every time I write something new, the last one was there's no such thing as an optimal ice bath, or I forget what the headline, but it went in, how do you know what temperature? How do you know what time is right for you? Just like there's no, one weight or number of reps that you should do for, I don't know, shoulder press or something. Everybody's body is different. So how do you determine the right temperature and the right time? Okay, use this kind of approach. You can sign up for that, and you'll get sick of hearing from me.
I don't think anybody's going to get sick of hearing from you. And
I hope not. I
I
got a
will,
lot to say.
yeah, I will put all that in the show notes and make sure I lead people to your socials. That way they can follow along. And man, congratulations again. I can't wait to see what you guys do next. I know you got something up your sleeve. You're not telling us about right now. But it's been a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Josh. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's been ours. Thank you very much, sir.